Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Thucydides Peloponnesian War. Today we're going to be starting I think it's going to be divided in two parts, the summer of the 17th year. Again, we're using the Crawley translation from Landmark Thucydides. We're using, for the purposes of the online project element, the Google Books version, which has some issues we talked about before. We're in the beginning of book six of of uh, uh, of the Thucydides' work. We're starting in chapter 8, where we start this summer of the 17th year. He says early in the spring of the following summer, the Athenian envoys arrived from Sicily, and Agassian with them began bringing the 60 talents of uncoined silver as a month's pay for the 60 ships, which they were asked to have sent them. The Athenians held an assembly upon hearing from um, Agestini and their own envoy's report, as attractive as it was untrue, was the state of affairs generally, and in particular as to the money, of which it was said there was an abundance of in the treasury, temples and treasury, voted to send 60 ships to the Sicilians under the command of Alcibiades, son of Clinias. Nicias, son of Nicodemus, and Lachmer, son of Xenophanes, who were appointed with full powers. They were to help the Assyrians against the Semalutheans to restore Leontide upon gaining any advantage in the war, and to order all other matters in Sicily, as they should deem best of the interest of Athens. 5 days after this assembly was held to consider the speediest means of equipping ships, and to vote whatever else may be required by the generals for the expedition, Nicias, who had been chosen to command against his will, who thought that the city was not well advised, but upon a slight and specious pretext, was aspiring the conquest of the whole of Sicily, a great matter to achieve, came forward in hope of diverting the Athenians from the enterprise, and gave the following counsel. And now this is Nicias' speech to the Athenians, right? Although this assembly was convened to consider the preparations to be made for sailing to Sicily, I think, notwithstanding, that we should still examine whether it would be better to send out ships at all, that we ought not to give so little consideration to the matter of such import, or lest ourselves be persuaded by foreigners into undertaking a war which we have nothing to do. Yet individually I gain in honor by such recourse. I fear as little as other men for my person. Not that I think a man needs to be any worse of a citizen for taking some thought of his own person and state. On the contrary, such a man would for his own sake desire the prosperity of his country more than others. Nevertheless, I have never spoken against my conviction to gain honor. I shall not begin to do so now, but I shall say what I think best. Against your character, any words of mine would be weak enough, particularly if they were to advise you to keep what you have and not risk it for advantage which are dubious both in themselves and which you may or may not attain. I will therefore content myself with showing that your ardor is untimely and that your ambition is not easily accomplished. I affirm then that you leave I affirm that you leave many enemies behind you here to go there far away and bring more back with you. You imagine perhaps that the treaty which you have made can be trusted, a treaty that will continue to exist normally as long as you keep quiet. For nominal it has become, owing to the practice of certain men here and at Sparta, which in the event of a more serious reverse in any quarter would not delay our enemies in a moment in attacking us. First, because of the convention was forced upon them by disaster and was less honorable to them than to us. And secondly, because it was this very convention, there are many points that are still disputed. Again, some of the most powerful cities has never accepted the arrangement at all. Some of these are in open war with us. Others, as the Spartans, do not yet move, are restrained by truces renewed every 10 days. And it is only too probable that they found our power divided as we are hurrying to divide it. They would attack us vigorously with the Siliots, who alliance they would have in part valued as they would that of few others. A man ought therefore to consider these points and not think of running risk with a country so placed so critically of gasping at another empire before they have secured the one we have already. For in fact, the Thracian Caledonians have been all these years in revolt from us without being yet subdued, and others on the mainland yet yield us but a doubtful obedience. Meanwhile, the Egyptians, our allies, have been wronged, and we run to help them, while the rebels who have been so long wronged us still wait for punishment. And yet the latter, if be brought under, might be kept in other words, yet the latter, if brought under, might be kept under, while the Sicilians, even if conquered, are too far off and too numerous to be ruled without difficulty. Now it is folly to go against men who could not be kept even under if conquered, while failure would leave us in a very different position from which we occupied from before the enterprise. The Sicilians, again, to make them as they are present in any event of the Syracusan conquest, which the Augustinians most frequently used to frighten us, would, to my thinking, be even less dangerous to us than before. At present, they might possibly come here as separate cities for the love of Sparta. In another case, one empire would scarcely attack another after joining the Peloponnesians to overthrow ours. They could only expect to see the same hands overthrow their own in the same ways. The Hellenes in Sicily would fear us most if we never went there at all, and the next to this, if after displaying our power we went away again as soon as possible. We all know we all know that which is farthest off, and the reputation of which can be least tested is the object of admiration, and the least reserved to us, they would at once begin to look down upon us and would join with our enemies here against us. You have yourself experienced this in regards to the Spartans and their allies, whom you unexpected success as compared to with you feared at first had made you suddenly despise, tempting you further to conquest of Sicily. Instead, however, of being puffed up by the misfortune of your adversaries, you ought to think of breaking their spirit before giving yourselves up to confidence, and to understand that the one thought awakened by the Spartans by their disgrace is how they may even now, if possible, overthrow us and repair their dishonor, insomuch as they have for a very long time devoted themselves to the cultivation of military renown above all. Our struggle, therefore, if we are wise, will not be for the barbarian Augustinians in Sicily, but to defend ourselves most effectively against the oligarchic machinations of Sparta. Next, chapter 12. We should also remember that we are only now enjoying some respite from the great pestilence, from war, and no small benefit of our states and persons, and that it is right to employ these at home on our own behalf instead of using them on behalf of these exiles, whose interest it is to lie as well as they can, who do nothing but talk themselves and leave the dangers to others, and who, if they succeed, will show no proper gratitude, and if they fail, will drag down their friends with them. And if there be any man here overjoyed by being chosen to command, who urges you to make the expedition merely for ends of his own, especially if he's still too young to command, who seeks to be admired by his stud of horse for his stud of horses, on the account of heavy expenses hoped for some profit from his appointment, do not allow such a one to maintain his private spender at his country's risk. But remember that such persons injure the public fortune while they squander their own, and that this is a matter of importance, and not for one a for and not for a young man to decide or hastily to take in hand. When I see such person now sitting here at the side of that same individual and summoned by him, alarm seizes me, and I in turn summon any of the older men that may have such a person sitting next to him, not to let himself be checked by shame, for fear of being thought a crowd if he does not vote for war. But remember how rarely success is gained by wishing, and how often a forecast to leave to them the mad dreams of conquest. And true lover of his country, now threatened by the dangers, the great danger in its history, to hold up his hand on the other side to vote that the Sicilians be left in the limits now existing between us, limits of which no one can complain. The Ionian Sea for the coasting voyage, and the Sicilian open across the open main, to enjoy their own possessions and to settle their own quarrels. Let the Aegeans, for their own part, be told to end by themselves the war with the Similitunes, for which they began without consulting the Athenians, and that for the future we do not enter into alliance, as we have been used to do, with people whom we must help in their need and who can never help us in ours. And you, Prytanes, the officials, right? If you can think it's your duty to care for the republic, the Commonwealth, or the city, if you wish to show yourself a good citizen, put the question to the vote, and take a second time the opinions of the Athenians. If you are afraid to move the question again, consider that a violation of the law cannot, with so many abettors, incur any change, that you will be the physicians of your misguided city, and that the virtue excellence of men in office is briefly this: to do their country as much good as they can, or in any case do no harm that that they can avoid. Such were the words of Nicias. Most of the Athenians who came forward spoke in favor of the expedition, and not wanting annulling what had been voted. Some had spoke on the other side, but for the warmest advocate of this position was, however, Alcibiades, son of Plinius, who wished to thwart Nicias both in his political at his political opponent and also because of his attack he had made upon him in the speech, and who was besides exceedingly ambitious of a of a command by which he hoped to reduce Thessaly and Carthage, and personally gain in wealth and reputation by means of his success. For the position he held among the citizens led him to indulge his taste beyond what his real means could bear, both in keeping horses and the rest of his expenditure. And this later on had not a little to do with the ruin of the Athenian city, with Athens, with Athens. Alarmed by the greatness of the license of his own life, and habits, and the ambition which he showed in all things whatsoever that he undertook. The mass of people marked him as as the aspirant to the tyranny, and became his enemies. Although in his public life his conduct of the war was good, as could be desired, in his private life his habits gave offense to everyone, and causing them to commit affairs to the one hand, and thus before long to the ruin of the city. Meanwhile, he came forward and gave the following advice to the Athenians. Athenians, I have a better right to command than others. I must begin with this, as Nicias has attacked me, and at the same time I believe myself to be worthy of it. The things for which I am being abused bring fame to my accuser and to myself, and also profit to my country. The Hellenes, after expecting to see our country ruined by this war, concluded it must be even greater than it really was by reason of the magnificence which I represented at the Olympic Games, which I sent into the list of 7 chariots, a number never before entrusted by any private person, and won the first prize, and the second, and the fourth, and took care to have everything else in a style worthy of my victory. Regarding custom regarding such display as honorable, and they cannot be made without leaving behind them an impression of power. Again, any splendor that I may have exhibited at home in providing choruses or otherwise is naturally envied by my fellow citizens, but in the eyes of the foreigners has the air of strength, as in the other instance. And this is no useless folly. When a man at his own private cost benefits not only himself but his city. Nor is it unfair that he who prides himself on his position should refuse to be upon an equality with the rest. He who is badly off has his misfortune all to himself, as we do not see men courted in adversity on the like principle that man ought to be accepted, man to accept the insolence of prosperity, or less let him first mete out equal measure to all, and then demand it to have meted out to him. What I know is that the person of this kind and all others that have obtained any distinction, although they may have been unpopular in their lifetime in relations with their fellow men, and especially with their equals, leave to prosperity the desire of claiming connection with them even greater without connection with them even without any ground, and are vaunted by their country to which they belong, not as strangers or evildoers, but of the fellow countrymen and heroes. Such were my aspirations, and however I am abused for them in my private life, the question is whether anyone managing public affairs better than I do, having united the most powerful states on the Peloponnese without great danger or expense to you. I compelled the Spartans to stake their all on the issue of a single day at Mantua, and although victorious in the battle, they have never since fully recovered confidence. Thus did my youth and so-called monstrous folly finding fitting arguments to deal with the power of the Peloponnesians and its ardor to win the confidence and prevail, and did not and do not be afraid of my youth now. But I am still, uh, while I am still in its flower, and Nicias appears fortunate, avail yourself to the utmost of the service of us both. You should, nor should you rescind your resolution to sail to Sicily on the ground that you could not be going to attack a great power. The cities in Sicily are peopled by mostly rabbles, by a motley rabbles, and easily change their institutions and adopt new ones in their stead. And consequently, the inhabitants, being without any feeling of patriotism, are not provided with arms for their persons, and are not regularly established themselves on the land. Every man thinks that either by fair words or party strife that he can obtain something at the public expense, and then, in the event of the catastrophe, settled in some other country, and make his preparations accordingly. From a mob like this, you need not look for either unanimity in council or unity in action, but they will probably one by one come in as they get a fair offer, especially if they are torn by civil strife, as we are told. Moreover, the Sicilians have not so many hoplites as they boast, just as the Hellenes generally do not prove they're so numerous as each city reckoned himself. But the Hellenes greatly overestimated their number, and this hardly had any adequate force of hoplites throughout this war. The cities in the Sicily, therefore, from all that I can hear, will be found as I say, and I have not pointed out all our advantages. For we shall have the help of many barbarians who, far from hatred of the Syracusan, will join us in attacking them, nor will the power at home prove any hindrance, if you judge rightly. For our fathers with these same adversities, said which it was said we have sorry, our fathers with these same adversaries, which we have said we shall now leave behind us when we sail. And the Medes, as their enemy as well, were able to win an empire, depending solely on their superiority at sea. The Peloponnesians never had so little hope against us as the present, and let them be so optimistic, although strong enough to invade our country, even if we stay at home. They can never hurt us with their navy if we leave one of our own behind us that is a match for them. In the state of affairs, what reason can give to ourselves for holding back, or or what excuse can we offer to our allies in Sicily for not helping them? They are our confederates, and we are bound to assist them without objecting that they have not assisted us. We did not take them into alliance to have them help us in Hellenes, but that they might so annoy our enemies in Sicily as to prevent them from coming over here and attacking us. It is thus that empire that has been. It is thus that empire had been won, both by us and by others that have held it by constant readiness to support all, or never, whether barbarian or Hellenist, that invite assistance. Since if all were to keep quiet, or to pick up and choose whom they might ought to assist, we should make few new conquests, and should imperil those who have come already won. Men do not rest content with parrying the attacks of superior, but often strike the first blow to prevent the attack being made. Moreover, we cannot fix the exact point at which our empire shall stop. We have reached a position in which we must not be content with remaining what we have, but must scheme to extend it if we cease to rule others, if we shall be in danger of being ruled ourselves. Nor can you look at an action from the same point of view as others unless you are prepared to change your habits and make them resemble theirs. This Alcibiades speech continues. Be convinced that we shall that we shall be convinced that we shall augment our power at home by this adventure abroad, and let us make the expedition so to humble the pride of the Peloponnesians by sailing off to Sicily, and letting them see how little we care for the peace they are now enjoying. At the same time, we shall either become masters, as we very easily may, of the whole of Hellenes through the accession of the Sicilian Hellenes, or in any case ruin the Sicilians to no small advantage to ourselves and our allies. Our ability to stay, if successful, or to return, if not, will be secured to us by our navy, as we shall be superior at sea to all the Sicilians put together. We do not let the passive policy which Nicias advocates, or or his setting of the young against the old, turn you from your purpose, but in the old good fashion by which our fathers, and old and young together, by their united consuls, brought our affairs to the present height. Do you endeavor still to advance them, under that neither youth nor old age can do anything the one without the other, but that levity, sobriety, and deliberate judgment are the strongest when united, and that by sinking into inaction, the city, like everything else, will wear itself out, and its skills in everything decay, while each fresh struggle will give it a fresh experience and make it more used to defend itself, not in words but in deeds. In short, my conviction is that a city not inactive by nature could not choose a quicker way to ruin than itself by suddenly adopting such a policy, and that the safest rule of life is to take one's character and institutions, for better or worse, and live up to them as closely as one can. Such were the words of Alcibiades. After hearing this, the Aegeans and some Laetonian exiles who came forward, reminding them of their oaths and imploring their assistance, the Athenians came more eager for the expedition than before. Nicias, perceiving that it would now be useless to try to deter them by the old line of argument, but thinking that he might perhaps, after the resolution by the extravagance of his estimates, came forward the second time and spoke as follows. Now um, this is Nicias' second speech. Nicias' second speech to them. Now he doesn't think. Now he's not going to come with you. He's going to try another approach. He wants to stop it. So before he talked about it, not he talked in the sense of that it's not worth doing, and da, da, da. Now he's going to go a different strategy. Okay. I see that the Athenians that you are thoroughly bent on this expedition, and therefore hope that all will turn out as we wish. I proceed to give you my opinion at the present juncture. From all that I hear, we are going against cities that are great and not subject to one another, or in need of change, so as to wish to pass from enforced servitude to easier condition, or to be least likely to accept our rule in exchange for freedom, and to take only the Hellenistic cities, which are very numerous from one island. Besides, Naxos and Cantina, which I expect to join us from their connection with Leonata, there are seven others armed in every way, just like like our own power, particularly Selinus and Syracuse, the main objective of our expedition. These are full of hoplites, archers, and dart throwers, have trimedes in abundance, and a multitude of men to man them. They also have money, partly in hand of private persons and partly from the temples of Selinus and the the Syracuse tribute of the first fruits from some of the barbarians as well. But their chief advantage over us lies in the number of their horse. For in fact, they grow their grain at home instead of importing it. Against a power of this kind, it will not do to have merely a weak naval armament, but we shall want a large land army to sail with us. If we are to do anything worthy of our ambition, and not be shut off from the country by a numerous cavalry, especially if the city should take alarm and combine, we should be left without friends except the Aegeans to furnish us with cavalry with which to defend ourselves. It would be disgraceful to have to retire under compulsion, or to send back for reinforcements, owing to want of reflection at first. We must therefore start from home with a competent force, seeing that if we are going to sail from our country and upon the expedition, not like any which you may have undertaken in the quality of allies. Among your subject cities here in Helena, many additional supplies needed are readily drawn from friendly territory, but we are cutting ourselves off and going into land entirely savage, from which during 4 months in winter, and not even easy for us to for a messenger to get to Athens. I think, therefore, that we ought to take a great number of hoplites, both from Athens and our allies, and not merely from our subjects, but also from any that we are able to get for love of money or from love of money in the Peloponnesus, and great number of archers and slingers, and those to oppose the Sicilian horse. Meanwhile, we must have overwhelming superiority at sea to enable us more easily to carry in what we want, and must take our own grain in merchant vessels, that is to say, wheat and roasted barley, and bakers from the mills compelled to serve for pay in proper proportion, so that we may become weather bound. The armament may not lack provisions, as it is not every city that will be able to sustain numbers like ours. We must also provide ourselves with everything else as far as we can, so not to be dependent upon others. And above all, we must take with us from home as much money as possible, as the sums talked of is readily at Aegeus readily. But you may be sure in talk then, in other words, for we must take from home as much money as possible, as the sums talked of as already at Aegeus are readier than may be sure in talk than in any other ways. Any other way. So nobody's saying that we should need to take money with us because we can't rely on the Assyrian. Indeed, even if we leave Athens with a force not only equal to that of the enemy, except in the number of hoplites in the field, but even at the point superior to him, we still find it difficult to conquer Sicily or save ourselves. We must not disguise from ourselves that we are to go to found a city among strangers and enemies. That he must, and he who undertakes such an enterprise should be prepared to become master of the country the first day he lands, or failing this, to find everything else ours to him. Fearing this, knowing that he shall knowing that we shall have need for much good counsel and more good fortune, a hard matter of moral men to aspire, I wish as much as possible to make myself independent of fortune before sailing, and when I do sail, to be safe with a strong force that force can make me. This I believe to be the surest for the country at large, and the safest for us who are to go on the expedition. If anyone thinks differently, I resign to him my command. Now, this is a very good trick Nicias has done. Nicias has kind of said, "Well, no, let's do this better. Let's do this right. Let's do this." Made it a great endeavor. Made it a full phase invasion instead of the limited plan that's going to rely on some fortune. He's going to be overwhelming force, overwhelming force, overwhelming thing. And In other words, what he's doing is he's upping the costs and what we have to do, hoping that the Athenians say, "Oh no, this is not really worth it." Okay, this is the trick he's doing. He's overselling what needs to be done to make this such a great endeavor that's going to cost so much that maybe the Athenian assembly say, "No." With Nicias concluded, thinking that he should either put the Athenian off by the magnitude of the undertaking, or if obliged to sail on the expedition, thus do so in the safest way possible. The Athenians, however, far from having their enthusiasm for the voyage destroyed by the burdensome of the preparations, became more eager for it than ever, and just the contrary took place of what Nicias had thought, as he held that he had given good advice, and in other words, that he held that he had given good advice, and that the expedition would be the safest in the world. Everyone fell in love with the enterprise. The older men thought that they would either subdue the place against which they were to sail, or in any event, with so large a force met with no disaster. Those who, in the prime of life, no longer felt a longing for foreign sights and spectacles had no doubt that they should come safe home safe again. While the idea of the common people and the soldiery was to earn wages at the moment and make conquest that would simply never ending funds of pay for the future. With this enthusiasm, the majority, that the few that did not like it feared to appear unpatriotic by upholding up their hands against it, so kept quiet. In other words, Nicias's plan completely backfired. In fact, he made it worse by doing this. In fact, what was an acceptable risk of a smaller force, you know, in that thing, with some risk and some daring, um, and if you lost it, it wouldn't cost you that much. But now everything is being. This is like, okay, I can only agree to this if we triple, not only take this stake. No, no, no. We put all in. Okay. So now he hoped that this would scare them off. In fact, they did the opposite. At least one of the Athenians came forward and called upon Nicias and told him that he ought not to make excuses or put them off, but say at once before them all what forces the Athenians should vote him. Upon this, he said, not without reluctance, that he would advise upon the matter more at leisure with his colleagues, as far, however, as he could see the present, they must sail with at least 100 triremes, the Athenians providing as many transports as they might determine, sending off others from their allies, but not less than 5,000 hoplites in all. The Athenians and allies, and if more possible, and the rest of the armaments in proportion, archers from home and from Crete, slingers, and whatever else seems desirable, bringing ready-made by the general and taken with them. Upon hearing this, the Athenians at once voted the general should have full powers, and in the matters of the numbers of the armies and the expedition greatly, as so to do as they judged best in the matters of interest of Athens. After this, preparations began, and messages began sent to the allies, and enlistments rolled down at home. And the city had just recovered from the plague and the long war, and the number of young men had grown up in the capital had accumulated by reason of the peace. Everything was more easily provided. In midst of these preparations, all this, in other words, and this is the in midst of these preparations, the stone chimeras in the city of Athens, that is to say, the customary square figures so common in the doorways of private houses and temples, had in one night most of them had their faces mutilated. No one knew who had done it, but a large public reward had been offered to find those responsible. It was further voted that anyone who knew of any other act of impiety having been committed should come and give information without fear of consequences, whether he was a citizen, alien, or slave. And the matter was taken up more seriously, as it had thought to be ominous for the expedition, and is part of a conspiracy to bring about a revolution and upset the democracy. Information was accordingly given by some residents, aliens, and body servants, not about the Hemes, but about the previous mutilation of some other images perpetrated by young men in a drunken frolic and mock celebrations of the mysteries, alleged to have been taking place in a private home. When Alcibiades was implicated in this charge, it was taken up by those who could least endure him, because he stood in the way of their obtaining the undisturbed leadership of the people, and who thought that if he were once removed, the first place would be theirs. Accordingly, magnified the matter and loudly proclaimed that the affairs of the mysteries and the mutilations of the Hermite were all part and parcel of a scheme to overthrow the democracy, and that nothing of all of this had been done without Alcibiades. The proof alleged being the general and undemocratic license of his life and habits. Alcibiades denied these charges in question, and also offered to stand trial before going on the expedition, for which in preparation he were now complete, so as it would determine whether he was guilty of the act imputed to him, as he was willing to be punished if found guilty of being but ready, if acquitted, to take command. Meanwhile, he protested against their receiving slanders against him in his absence, and begged them rather to put him to death at once if he was guilty, and pointed out the imprudence of sending him out as the head of so large an army when so serious a charge is still undecided. But his enemies feared that he would have had the army support if he would try immediately, and that the people might relent in favor of the man and protect him, and as the cause of the Argives and some of the Mantuans joining in the expedition, and did their utmost to have the position rejected, putting forward other orators who said that he ought at present to sail and not delay the departure of the army, and to be tried on his return within a fixed number of days, their plan being to have him sent for and brought home upon trial some graver charge, when they should have more easily would have more easily trumped up in absence. According, it was decreed that he should sail. So let's stop here. Let's stop here with this. That he's going. He wanted to be charged right now, but they said no, it's too risky because maybe he'll get off because the boulders and things like this. So let's send him out and then bring him back, and then we can trump up worse charges against him. Um, and that's how this ends. Now, I'm going to end part one. This is part one of this. We'll continue part two tomorrow, which continues the summer of the 17th year, the beginning of the Sicilian campaign, the Sicilian adventure. If you have any comments, put them below. If you have questions or comments, I'll respond to them when I see them. If you have any suggestions, put them forward also. Like it. If you like what I did, like it. If you don't like it, of course, you can say thumb down too. Be honest. You can subscribe and tell other people. Share this on social media if you think it would interest somebody. If there is a next, when we have our part two tomorrow, in that sense, wraps up this. If you have want to follow me, if you want to subscribe, and if you want to follow me on social media to follow more information, the information is below. Also, if you want to help the channel, kind of, there's ways by being a patron or a supporter of the channel. You can do so through either Subscribestar or Patreon. That's below. And that has more information in either of those places. Okay, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye-bye.